Fala pessoal, tudo bem? Mais um DfenseCast pela Defense Produções. Hoje nós estamos com a NETSCOUT aqui e eu tenho certeza que junto com meu amigo Rodolfo, o papo vai ser muito bacana. O que você acha, Rodolfo?
Bora. Estamos mais um podcast aqui com um dos fabricantes, né? Então, perspectivas boas para a gente conversar sobre tudo, né? Tecnologia, inteligência artificial, NETSCOUT, quem é, o que faz. Vai ser bem legal, bora.
Legal, estamos da NETSCOUT aqui com Fabiane e com Sameer Khanna. So now we are switching to English to improve and to enjoy better the conversation. So first of all, after switching to English, thank you to join our podcast, Sameer.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. It's great. Yeah, good to meet you.
Good.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, as partners, we are equally very deep in Brazilian market. So it's a pleasure to have you guys as a partner for us. So before talking a little bit about defense and NETSCOUT and how things play in the Brazilian market, I would like to invite you to present yourselves. So would you like to start, Fabiane?
Great. So my name is Fabiane. I'm a system engineer at NETSCOUT. I'm working sales. And I have been in the vendor side for a long time. So I have like 15 years working with cybersecurity and the industry. And now at NETSCOUT, I had the opportunity to join this amazing team in Brazil and be part of.
Very good. So
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So my name is Sameer Khanna. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management for NETSCOUT, and specifically work in the network security side of the product, of all the different products that we have. And I've been with NETSCOUT for quite some time, for many years, and I've worked in various different roles, and I've worked with various different industries as well. You know, anything from financial to healthcare to the government, you name it. And I've worked in all those sectors, or worked with those sectors.
very good, Sameer. Good to know. I spotted that you had two journeys on NETSCOUT, isn't it?
Yes, this
Yeah.
is actually my second stint in NETSCOUT. I left NETSCOUT for a few years. I did a couple startups in Silicon Valley. One in the elastic load balancing or space, actually. Company called Avi Networks got acquired by VMware. And then I worked for another private cloud company called Stratoscale. And then I rejoined NETSCOUT in a slightly different capacity, you know, when they acquired Arbor. So Arbor is actually part of NETSCOUT as well.
So both of you, what you guys are passionate in terms of cybersecurity? Because everybody that works with cybersecurity had a specific passion to keep on the profession. Yeah. So what motivates you to still work in cybersecurity and to keep going on this road?
Yeah. I guess cybersecurity is an area that is constantly evolve. So we see constantly things need to evolve because the threats are getting better, more advanced, and the vendors need to be more creative. So at least for me, the architecture part, when you have a customer with their challenge and their risks, and you are able to help them to fix things, it's something that for me is the most. And of course, it's not boring at all.
Yeah, for sure, not boring.
No boring.
I think for me personally, it's probably a couple things. Number one is it's a bit of a cat and mouse game, you know, which I find very interesting. Although it's hard to tell who's the cat and who's the mouse sometimes, you know, depending on how you look at it. And the other part that I actually really like is I actually do like helping organizations, you know, being able to catch certain things to prevent stuff like data theft. I mean, think about it, right? When you think about security, you think about breaches automatically. You think about the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And as a consumer, you worry about your data, right? Your personal stuff that's out there for anybody to use, right? So I think being able to defend against that is what keeps me going, and I'm pretty passionate about.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we're looking at me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my passion. I always worked with red team, so the cat and mouse thing. I think it's something that always bright my eyes. I don't know if I can say in English this way, but I think this is it. I learned everything on practice, on my practice skills. So from the red team perspective, that was not called red team in the past, but I think that's what keeps me motivated, and especially when I went to the defense part. So I stayed on the defense sector for quite a
So
long.
you prefer the more defense part? No, you prefer more
I prefer the attack, yeah.
the aggressive part.
Yeah, especially because I think all the attackers can learn easier the defense part. And I think the opposite way is not true. So I think when you know how to attack, you can think outside the box and try to bypass some defenses. While the defense teams are always trying to, now they attack right like this, so you need to...
It's always one step behind.
Yeah. Now we have some frameworks that are quite near real-time detection and try to predict the future about the attacks. But I think it's still the attack part most incredible for me. So that's why we have HyperX.
Yeah,
here.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, a
in
little
my,
bit of
in my
merchandise.
case, my son ever used to say that when he tries to describe my work, he has 5 years, so he tried to describe as a computer cop.
Yeah.
So my dad is a computer cop. So it's not so wrong, but yeah, but it's a kind of thing that motivates. Yeah. You are ever fighting against somebody, something, or yeah. So it's good.
Learning
And,
something new and trying to predict.
Yeah.
yeah. So you mentioned that you had some space in your career that you left NETSCOUT and then worked with cloud and another.
Yeah.
And then you back to NETSCOUT. But when you previously worked in that period, that companies had a boom of move to cloud, and then a lot of challenges on that. Here in Brazil, we saw that that kind of movements. We are seeing this same thing with AI, and then we are tackle this a little bit in some minutes. But in Brazil, it's common that people goes to the news with the fear of to being out of the movement. And don't know why they are going. So the marketing say go to cloud. Okay, I'm going to cloud. And then no matter the other problems, they are going. In the US, you think that in that time the companies went to cloud in not so organized way, just to go into cloud, or you in your opinion they went to cloud organized and then is a thing that's particular for Brazil, that the people is not so organized?
I don't think this is particularly Brazil. I think it's the whole world. But I think to answer that question properly, I would say, and luckily I had pretty early exposure in this, right? Because I was dealing with the public cloud was fairly new as well. It wasn't new, but it was still fairly new, right? And the big companies, the big ones with serious workloads, right? Massive workloads, they were very, very cautious. They had to be, right? And we can get into that in just a moment later. I think the driver for people to rush into that decision was because of cost. They wanted to save money and reduce complexity. That, I believe, is the biggest reason why they were rushing. Because in the US, because they were thinking, okay, if there's a way that I can do this in the cloud and increase the velocity with which I can offer my service to my clients, right? With availability that's not my headache, but that person's headache, great. Oh, and by the way, I save money and I don't have to hire so many people. Amazing. Where do I sign? And they were signing everywhere, right? I'm oversimplifying. Obviously, there's more to this story. But I believe that's the reason why everybody started to go to the cloud. Now, there's a lot of promise. And over time, we've actually seen some of that actually happen, and take form. But at the time, People didn't know exactly how this would manifest over time. At the same time, however, there was also a huge battle there was also a necessity for cloud for a different reason, which is from a purely technological reason, which was scale. The large ones, the really large organizations, and I've worked with some of the hyperscalers, the really, really big companies that I'm sure you know who they are. I don't need to name them. The hyperscalers had a different challenge, right? Because they ran into a problem of scale before everybody else ran into a problem of scale. Actually, that's how AWS came into the business they were trying to solve their own problems, and they designed an infrastructure that would make sense. Then they realized that this infrastructure more than likely makes sense across the board, right? At least from how I understand the story. Hopefully that is the truth. The hyperscalers had challenge with scale. They had so much workload and so many people. They had to figure out a mechanism to create a very elastic architecture. And so that's why they were testing with OpenStack. If you remember, OpenStack was very famous at the time, to some extent even still is. But they were really thinking about OpenStack, and they were trying to deal with, do I do private cloud or do I public cloud? And because of cost and flexibility and ownership, they started to go towards the public cloud space. So back to your question, I don't think Brazil is unique in that. I think it was across the board.
I guess all the companies had this stage, like bringing everything to private cloud and then need to scale and start to go into public cloud to get more confidence. But yeah.
I noticed that you guys said maybe 2 or 3 words like cost, like saving time and stuff like this. And well, as a cybersecurity guys, we didn't mention security. So I think that's a good thing in the beginning. There was the security guys, there was the information security teams. They are quite aware about some of the risks in the past, but they are only the information security team. And with the time, with the time passing by, we have more regulations, more focus about the security part. So I don't know if this is a must for everything in the world, but security maybe came in the second place for the cloud.
Yeah, and I'm curious what you think about this, because security was very concerned and still is very concerned about that migration. In fact, the fact
that
you're
always thinking about risks.
Yeah, exactly. So the large organizations, them slowing down their migrations to the cloud was an amazing thing for security. And you could even argue that security influenced that decision to some extent, because they were very worried about the tools that will be available to them. It was very difficult for them to even think, and even now, to just take everything they have in their on-premise environments and try to convert it in the cloud. It's not that simple for a really large organization. So yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think that in the past, the security was not well positioned in terms of a strategy one. Yeah, so they are miles and miles away from the business. So if security think that this could be harmful to the business, they are shouting loud too far. Yeah. And then the second movement, they are close, but they had no influence. So they are talking, oh, it's dangerous. It's done. Stop. But nobody listen at all. Yeah. And then now I believe they are listen better than in
the risks.
Yeah. So I believe now they are listening a little bit more about the risks, about the concerns, the vulnerabilities that are in place. So I think things are getting better day by day. So yeah, I believe now we are in a better future provision.
We are seeing now our customers more concerned about visibility in the cloud, and this especially security people, because they are kind of it's like a dark spot. So they are going to the cloud, they need to implement the controls, they need to lower the risks. But how they do that? They don't have the visibility they had on on-premise environment. The tools that they could use it for it.
Yeah, how you take this balance between low cost, time saving, and all the thing and administration you have on the tools on-prem. Yeah,
and we have another fact. The security team is not usually a large team, and they need to handle with a lot of different tools. It's a puzzle. They need to get the pieces together.
Getting complex day by day.
It's very complex. And if we are talking about public cloud, we are talking about multi-cloud.
Yeah.
So they need to be specialists. So how many solutions to be able to lower the risk and protect that environment. So
Yeah, I think how the cyber world got complex after pandemics. Yeah, so the surface is changing at all.
it was complex already, but
Yeah.
it was complex with borders.
Yeah,
So now it's complex without borders. So they don't have more that firewall perimeter and things that they have before.
yeah, and then in another opportunity, I was talking with the product manager of AlgoSec here, and we are talking a little bit about the characteristic of the product, and then I used analogy of the secret sauce. Yeah, was very was good. So every product, as our product we have here on CISO X and the guys had on ViperX, every product has the power that is inside, and then it's the differentiator from the competitors. So here I was thinking what analogy I will use on this episode. So what the power of the NETSCOUT, thinking on this complex world and getting complex with, because the cloud, because the user behavior, because the complex of the system, because the complex of cyber, the society, what NETSCOUT could use as better to protect the most of the clients that has abroad of the world.
Yeah, what's a special app?
Yeah, the ace up on the sleeve. Yeah.
Well, I was hoping you'd wait at least 20 more minutes before you ask that
Yeah.
question.
Take your time.
You want to start with that first, okay? So there are many, but I think before we go into that, and I promise I will answer the question. But before I go into that, I do want to say something that's kind of important. What leads to the secret sauce? Okay. So the secret sauce, I would say, is visibility, right? But we'll get to, and how we do the visibility and what we do specifically when we say visibility is different. I guess if I had to put it in 2 words, I would say actionable visibility. Okay. But those 2 words have a lot of history behind it, and there's a lot behind it that happens. Okay. But let me put it this way. Why is the bigger question that I think I want to answer most, which is, why does it even matter, right? Because everybody offers visibility. There are a million tools and cybersecurity tools out there, and yet we have a problem as an industry, do we not? I mean, you look at the latest reports, the cost of a breach is up by, let me check, 10% over the last year. It's now roughly $5 million. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think all these stats here. Over 8 months to identify and contain a breach. Over 9 months if it's a malicious insider, okay? And 180% increase in the exploitation of vulnerabilities, right? And by the way, now we have custom malware for edge devices. And as part of the espionage operations, I'm sure you've heard, bold move. By the way, if you haven't, research it, right? Custom malware for edge devices, custom malware for hypervisors. We're living in a scary world.
Yeah.
Even with 1 million security tools out there, right? So the why is pretty important, right? And when I talk with customers, right, we talk about, oftentimes, like, we work very closely with financial verticals, like with the healthcare, because they obviously have high risk. I mean, prior to the podcast, we were starting to talk about this a little bit. That secret sauce becomes extremely important because you cannot protect, as a security organization, your assets in which you don't have visibility into. I think one of the number one problems that organizations have is they don't even know, they don't have a good sense of all the assets their organization owns that they need to protect in the first place. Imagine, it's like saying, oh, you are responsible for protecting my property. Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to tell you how many houses I have. Good luck.
How many doors? How many
Yeah.
windows?
How many doors? How many windows?
Where?
Yeah. And so now you have this, and somehow in the cybersecurity world, I love saying it, we still accept the job. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Like in the real, it's
Exactly.
like, oh, where do I sign? I love this job. Really? You know so little about what's happening, and yet you want to accept the job. So I'm spending my time accepting this job, looking at who's the neighbor, how often does the mailman come? I don't even know how many windows or doors do I have. Is somebody tunneling from underneath? So-called malicious insider. So our secret sauce is actionable visibility because the emphasis is about first understanding what you even have and getting a grasp of what you have and what those things do, so that you can better think about security, really putting a plan in place to protect your assets.
And let me do an observation here. This is get visibility, understand how the company, the network works, is very complex, because we are talking about amount of data that the security platform needs to handle, needs to deal with. So you have to know how many servers, how it works. When the mail comes, how many windows do you have? It's a challenge for the vendors, development and technology, be able to handle this amount of data
Yeah, as part
to
of the
bring visibility.
Yeah, as part of customer life, it's complex also, because sometimes they don't know the entire world they need to protect, but sometimes they know that this duty is really hard to do it, but they have no people to do it, and even if they has, what they will do after. I remember when I was talking once with my team when I was customer, and I got one scene of Game of Thrones, and the guy was in the upper hall of the wall of there, and then the guard say, teaching the other ones, so you need to watch, and if harmful is coming, so it's your job. And then what I do next, I don't know. It's your job to watch the enemies. So what I do next? So they sometimes they don't know the next step, or they are not prepared to do the next step. Yeah.
I'm going to use your analogy, if you don't mind. I'll borrow that analogy for one more thing. I think if you ask, and I have asked organizations, what's your number one problem? I've asked security teams, what's your number one problem? And they say, we don't have enough people. Right? That's usually the number one problem.
You're correct.
And I've tested this theory, by the way. I asked an organization that had only 5 employees, and they said they don't have enough people. Now, you could think, okay, that kind of makes sense. Then I asked another organization that has 900 security employees, and they said we don't have enough people. I thought, wow, you don't have enough employees? So then I got to thinking, okay, why don't you have enough employees? I'm going to go back to your analogy of the guard. Because every single person that's trying to get through the door, think of them as actual events generated by all the security tools that everybody owns. Every single event that comes in, you have to not think, is it allowed? Is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is it a true positive or a bad, or a false positive? So you have to, as a security team, not only allow the good traffic in, but also keep the bad traffic out. You have to do both simultaneously. That makes your job really hard. Because you could argue life of a cybersecurity person is actually fairly easy. Just turn everything off. Just put it on the highest alert.
No events.
No zero events, no problem. And now your organization cannot do business. Right? But the balance it's just striking the balance is where the biggest problem arises. How do I let the good stuff through? So most people actually, interestingly enough, again, based on my conversations with customers, most people are under-provisioned intentionally because they're afraid. Sometimes they're more afraid of blocking good traffic than they are of blocking of losing bad traffic, for example. Right? So think of it this way. The better way to describe it is if I, in my security tools, have very strict countermeasures, I'm afraid a legitimate service is going to get blocked and I cannot do business. And that induces a lot more fear than sometimes just being able to let a bad actor through.
Yeah. This is talks about what we were talking about. It's a conversation between the security comes a lot more closer to the business. So you don't make business if you don't have risks. So what risks you're going to accept, and the security is here to let you know the kind of risks you are able to accept.
That's exactly it. It's a risk management game.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what it is, right?
And then how you see, because NETSCOUT has a long journey, so working in terms of visibility and monitoring and so on. So How can NETSCOUT help the customer to get close? I believe will not to give the answer, but get close the answer of the risk management things in terms of visibility.
Yeah, I mean, there are several ways. We when we get in conversations with our clients, we often talk about, let's talk about your crown jewels, your critical assets. That's the first place we start. Because realistically speaking, if we were to ask an open question like, what do you want to protect? We know the answer.
Everything.
But we can't, in the world we live in, again, in practical terms, theoretically, that sounds amazing. Okay, right out of college, I would have said, let's do this. But the reality is that it's very hard to do because cost and all, you have to balance all those equations, right? All those variables in the equation. We start with the critical assets. And then we find a mechanism to allow the customers to gain access to what those critical assets are doing so that we can understand the behavior of those critical assets. And then you leverage that particular behavior to understand anything that might be potentially malicious or not. So I often say we're in the identification of suspicious activities game, because we as a security, and no security vendor can definitively always state, oh, this is definitely malicious. The determination of malicious from suspicious, that happens only by the organization. Because I could generate an event, you could generate an event, that same event in organization 1 is a problem, organization number 2 is not a problem. So we start with critical assets, we gain a good understanding of how they behave, and then based on that, we build a defense model, so to speak, to be able to protect those critical assets first. And then, of course, from there, we can branch out to gain visibility to other parts of the world.
I believe that this strategy is something that came from the NETSCOUT history.
Yeah.
So NETSCOUT is a company 40 years in the market, focused on working with packets. So this is the core, where NETSCOUT is able to analyze a huge amount of data and index this providing smart data for the customers. And this is something very difficult to have. So when NETSCOUT acquired Arbor, we gain all those security knowledge, feeds, and everything, cybersecurity that comes with Arbor. And so we are able to process that amount of data and also apply the mechanisms to help the customers to understand how the network works and what they could considering this is bad or not, or it's a malicious behavior or not. So we become very good at it.
A great example, I'll use an example. I can't name names, but real cases, right? A great example is another large financial organization. Working with them, they have multiple international locations. And when we deployed our network security solution in their environment, the first thing they said was, we don't generally ever use any vulnerable protocols because we have very strict compliance regulations and things like that. So we said, okay, that's fine. We turned it on, and within 24 hours, we saw a huge presence of Telnet, RDP, SMB version 1,
Yeah.
And, we didn't obviously want to make a big deal out of it, but the reaction on the customer's face when they saw that was priceless, because immediately they recognized, oh my God, even after all the stringent compliance standards and everything that they put in place, the reality is there are assets doing those kinds of things and they had no clue about. So they immediately took action right away and closed any particular gaps and holes. But this is just one example of many, right, where visibility plays a very important role. And that's why we work on that quite actively.
The customers are so used to, I have a EDR strategy, I have a microsegmentation strategy, I have next-gen firewalls, I have WAF. They already have a lot of tools because they need it, right? But there is always the gap. There's always the exception. There's always that point. And they don't have visibility. They don't know. So they have a lot of risks and gaps they don't know. So when we start to talking about checking the network or get a platform like an NDR and see the traffic in the network, they start to see exactly what is happening, the exceptions or the gaps. And that is huge because they don't even know they have those risks.
And actually, Fabi, to your point, I just want to say, when I talked about 100%, 180% increase in exploitation of vulnerabilities, that's exactly the reason I said it, because to the red team point, you were talking about earlier, the reason why there's so much exploitation of vulnerabilities is because actually the security tools have gotten better. So attackers have to find another way in. And that's what they're doing.
They evolve.
They're evolving. And that's why you have custom malware. You have malware-free activity that's on the rise as well. That's exactly those are the reasons right there.
Yeah.
They get more creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a reality about, I think it's about the big companies, you have a company acquiring another one, you do like a side road to connect stuff, then you have multiple teams. So it's a reality that when I was a leader as a customer as well, I was sure that I didn't have all the visibility. So yeah, you start with the crown jewels, the most critical assets, but there was a time that by 1 week, I think 1 week we have all the two-factor authentication for the Office 365, for example, enable everything okay. By 1 week, my red team caught maybe 10 to 12 systems that are not enabled with the two-factor authentication. That's the first thing we need to do. And yeah, the shadow IT stuff. So yeah, it's a complex scenario when you have big companies and large companies.
And when we say visibility, I just want to be clear, we talk about both north-south and east-west visibility.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because that also matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Previously, a couple of decades ago, if we saw that some manager of that company that has the dark liquid with gas, if you ask about what the concern is to protect the secret of the formula of the drink, yeah. But now the business is getting complex. Another analogy, when you say that we starting to look into to discover what the Jews that we need to protect. But previously we have a big one. Now the value is the same, but it's look like breaking in hundreds.
Yeah.
So it's loads and loads of Jews to protect.
Yeah.
And when we are going deeper, it's much more tools and skills of people and process to ensure that everything is flowing. So it's getting complex. Yeah. So what I think is that is getting worse to protect if you are not using properly the AI to protect, to help you to protect and to ingest all, to know all the events and so far, so on. How you see, guys, the AI coming to cyber tools to protecting, and what do you see this future getting worse in terms of the complexity coming from the attackers?
Yeah, and I'm curious about NETSCOUT as well.
Yeah.
What do y'all have inside NETSCOUT, or what you're thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's we talk about this all the time, right? We talk about AI from two perspectives. Number one, from the adversary, right? Them using it. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah.
And then number two, obviously from a defense perspective, right? Is how do we deal with this? So we have behavioral learning mechanisms already built within the product to be able to do some of the stuff that I already talked about, right? And that's anything from being able to detect initial access, mapping to the MITRE TTPs, all the way down to exfiltration of data and everything in between, right? All the stages. I think AI plays, to your earlier question, I think AI can play a very, very important role. I think we're beginning to see some massive strides in AI. AI is used for specifically within the cybersecurity space. But unfortunately, we have a lot of mixed reviews from customers who are practically using it, quite frankly. And the mixed reviews are, we still have quite a few false positive situation that's out there. We have customers, I know, we're in the NDR market, so we obviously know of other vendors that, that are using AI quite vigorously. And I think that's a really good and bold move. But customers, they want to invest into it like they want it to go into the cloud. And the reason they want to invest into it is because they're desperate to help utilize something that will reduce the number of events and only give them the true positives. That desperation, however, is what gets them to the first phase and get that spend or do that spend, but it doesn't materialize in reality. And when you think about why, is because I don't think the time is we're there already where you can take the human element out of the equation. There's a lot of human elements still involved and very, very important in the cybersecurity space. Let's use this example, right? A security tool generates an event. Let's say, I don't know, it's saying maybe potentially data staging or collection, right? Okay, the algorithm detected certain behaviors that corresponded to collection. Data is being staged, right? But it could be something as simple as an unusual file transfer. How do you distinguish easily, right? You can't. It's not that simple. Heuristically, yes, algorithms have become very smart to be able to detect frequency and they do all kinds of different mechanisms. We don't need to go into that to be able to detect, okay, this could be collection or data staging. But the reality is you still need, there's a human element that still needs to be able to go and validate that, yes, this in fact is or it isn't. And so you still end up spending that time anyway, right? To do that investigation. The last thing, and sorry, I'll pass it over to you, Fabi, is that this is why as NETSCOUT, we've emphasized from a product perspective on developing a product that can scale to meet the needs of these massive attack surface type situations in large organizations. Scale is critical. Even if you have the best detection engine, if you cannot scale, it's pointless because you cannot deploy it. So you have to be able to scale to meet the needs. That's number one. We talk about visibility. And the third thing is we keep the human element in so that that human can actually do the investigation, but has access to the right data and the most important data for them to quickly make the decision whether this is a true positive or not. And I think that right there is a very important part of the equation. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just thinking that AI, about the human element that is needed, because you need to train it.
Yeah.
So even if we are talking about defense mechanism or attack mechanism, we need to training. You need the human element to training, and then this is going to scale. But yeah, we still need the human element, right?
I believe the human is the keystone to plug the defense strategy into the business. What you mentioned, some harmful event for some company could not be a harmful event to another one. A couple of guys playing in the other side of the wall and making noise is harmful to a hospital, but it's not harmful to a playground. So different business, so different behaviors, the same behavior but different statements.
I think, Fabi, to your point, which I want to say again, I think you make an excellent point about this idea that you still have to train, right?
Yeah.
But what's the number one problem of most organizations? They don't have enough people, right? So how do you do that, right? Do you want to invest your energy and resources doing that, or do you want to use it somewhere else? So something to think about.
But what do you are thinking about the trends? Thinking a little bit about future. What you guys personally and what NETSCOUT has in the forefront to see the trends for the future in cyber? What are you thinking about the trends of attacks or threats, or what is coming?
Well, I think some of them I shared with you already. I think the detection tools are getting better, and we've seen that in some of the numbers. You look at the CrowdStrike report. You can look at, like, for example, some of the most popular ones, right? The Mandiant reports. If you go through them, I do, right? That's kind of part of what I do, my living, right? Detection's gotten better in some ways, right? The tools have gotten better, but then attackers are evolving to do some things that are unique, and obviously like with custom malware and things like that. I think that trend is going to continue. That's the essence of this game, right? This evolution is always going to happen. I think with businesses trying to become more efficient via public cloud, that's been happening as well quite a bit. I think we're going to continue to see complexity. initially we used to talk about complexity on-prem. Now complexity has a new definition, given that, the attack surface has completely evolved into this new world, right? There are many other things that we have to think about as well, right? We cannot underestimate, all the emphasis that businesses are putting to incorporate AI into their own business models. So we cannot forget about that, because that also presents a security risk, right? Because they're utilizing it already for various different functions in different industries, right? So customer service utilizing, the chatbots and everything else, and more organizations are beginning to implement AI, and that then is going to further evolve, the cybersecurity landscape even more.
EA becomes the new shadow IT.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Everybody's
exactly.
using,
Shadow
and there
AI,
is no
exactly.
regulation.
Exactly. Depending on where you go, I know Europe has some more regulations around it, but different countries have different systems. This is not obviously the podcast for the US's AI policy, because thank God, because that's a whole different topic in itself. So we won't go there. But NETSCOUT specific trends, I think from a network security perspective, several things. We are emphasizing quite a bit on giving security teams access to the highest fidelity data, right? And workflows, so they can make quick and efficient decisions. I think that's the key.
Based on real data.
Yeah.
This is very important. Very, very. Because sometimes they need to take decisions. They need to prioritize projects, prioritize the crown jewels. And they don't have actually data. They don't know how to do it.
Go ahead,
I was in your forecast. What do you think about the future trends?
Yeah, well, I think we talked about the human part of it. So I really, in the other podcast, I asked something about user behavior. So this is a thing that is not a recent word. We talk about user behavior since maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15. But with the AI, with all those tools, and with all the people using AI, I think now we have to rethink how we analyze the behavior. It's not more human behavior analysis now, it's merged behavior analysis. Yeah. So I don't know if I'm talking to a robot anymore. So behind the scenes, who is defending me? Who is behind the scenes while I'm doing an attack? So from my perspective is to rethink the way of how you can do the user behavior analysis for the tools. And from my perspective, from a red team consultants, how can we bypass those tools that are much more efficient if they are well configured? So you have human behind, you still needs the human to analyze stuff, but they are humans with steroids, and these steroids are like the AI. So in the future, I think that we are going to enter this matrix world, let's say. Yeah.
Good. I should have worn a hoodie. I made a mistake over here.
Good. Cool. And just to we are getting close to the end, but before we finish, I would like to listen a little bit about some tips or recommendations that you can leave to the audience. Think a little bit about the concerns of nowadays, because there is no problem solved. There's a lot of things unsolved, flying away, and getting new brand of problems coming from the new cyber threats and so far, so on. What the recommendation for the audience? What if you are customers, what you can prioritize or do better? Have a tip or recommendation for them?
You want me to go? Okay. Okay. All right.
That is a good one.
So, I think I have a very, maybe I'm a little biased, but I really, really like the security by design principle. I am a huge proponent of that and a fan of that. Because I think sometimes it's the simplest things that you can do to protect yourself as an organization. Unfortunately, it's also a very hard thing. to build security by design means you have to have a very, very solid understanding of your environment. And it's not an easy way out, but it's probably the best way out, the most strongest way out. So organizations, and again, like I said, I've talked about hyperscalers, small organizations, it doesn't matter. The organizations with whom that I've worked with, the ones that have a very good understanding of what their assets are and what they're doing, tend to have the most secure environments. And by the way, if somebody was to poll a group of these organizations, all their CISOs, and ask them how many of you have been breached, all of them will raise their hands, right? If they're allowed to. Yes, they've all had intrusions, not breaches. Maybe I'll be careful with that. Maybe intrusions. Everyone has intrusions. It's inevitable. But the reality is, the ones that are the most effective are the ones who have embraced that security by design principle, who have a solid understanding of the environment.
Yeah, I would say visibility.
As simple as that.
Simple as that.
Amazing. Awesome.
Because, how is your attack surface? How is the challenge? What do you need to defend? Do you have public cloud? You have on-premise? What do you have? You need to know. You need to know to defend it. Or you are going to expend millions and millions in platforms and team, and you are not be ready.
Yeah, one of the most complex, and then it's not complex because the competence, but it's a complex to make things work in a cyber framework like NIST is asset management. Yeah, so you cannot protect if you had no assets.
If you don't know.
Yeah, and you have you can share this risk with the business. I have everything here. This is everything that I have. We are screwed. Okay, we have a lot of issues, a lot of riches, but let's start from somewhere. But I shared all the risks, so that's very important. Yeah,
it's amazing. The company expends a lot of money in tools to cofre de senha.
Yeah.
And then they have directly access to the system, and they don't know. They expend a lot of money with SASE, and they have the exception of the endpoints that go straight to the internet without protection. And they expend a lot of money with WAF, and they don't do SSL decryption because it's hard. And you see, they could expend millions and millions in security tools to get that puzzle, but they need to have visibility to understand the gaps and what they are leaving behind. And usually they don't know. And those gaps are the ones that generates the high risk and could generate events and everything.
Yeah, it's where the red team are gonna focus. You have a lot of tools. Why I will take 2, 3, 4 days to bypass a tool if I have a firewall open here, I have something
exactly
there. So,
I have a theory that if you had 1/3 of your environment in obsolescence way, you have the same amount that you don't know as a shadow IT. Yeah. So if you are not awarded to fix and to evolve the systems that you use, because if it's useless, you just turn it off and get the lights on. But you need that. If you need that, and then you're not make the updates on that, you are not so diligent. So if you're not so diligent in the thing that that is critical, what you are doing to think that you don't know. Yeah. So guys, visibility with NETSCOUT. So guys, just to finish, I would like to thank you. Thank you, my co-host. Was amazing conversation. I was looking
so fast.
Yeah.
It's 15 minutes already.
I thought it was 10 minutes and then it's almost 1 hour. So
that's
amazing,
the magic of the podcast.
Amazing conversation. So I would like to thank you, and how the audience can reach you on LinkedIn or another ways to get in touch.
You can find us on LinkedIn, and also through partners like Defense could take NETSCOUT to you.
Good. In some place of the screen, there's a link of their LinkedIns. So
great.
Yeah, good.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
It's great to meet you, and thank you for inviting us to the podcast. It was great conversation.
It was amazing. Thank you.
Cool.
Pessoal, espero que vocês tenham gostado. Gostaram? Curtam, comentem aqui, tragam novas ideias, compartilhem com a audiência, com os amigos, e assim a gente vai progredindo com os nossos conteúdos aqui do DfenseCast. Beleza? Vamos nessa e fiquem ligados para os próximos episódios. Valeu!